Straw Hut Media.
Hello on the Rockers. Pride season continues as we take you to the movies with film critic, podcaster, writer, cinemaphile Alonso Duralde as we talk about his career and the culture of queer Hollywood with me, your sassy host with the sassy most. Raise a glass, let the drinks begin. It's On the Rocks.
Thank you for being
Boulevard.
Life is a banquet, and most poor suckers are starving to death.
I'd like to propose a toast.
This is On the Rocks with Alexander, where I drink with your favorite celebrities as we talk about fashion, entertainment, pop culture, reality TV, and, well, that's about it. So pop a cork, lean back, and raise a glass to On the Rocks.
fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Lord have mercy, buttons and bows and pantyhose. On the Rocks podcast, a place where we're too glam to give a damn. Follow us on Instagram and on TikTok at On the Rocks on Air, and on Facebook, On the Rocks Radio Show. Send me an email, book me for a pride, wedding, funeral, quinceañera, bris. I don't care, I'll show up. Info at ontherocksradioshow.com. Send us your comments, guest requests, and guest questions. We have tons of questions tonight. The show's presented by Straw Hut Media. You can watch and or listen to our now over 358 episodes at ontherocksradioshow.com. My printer messed up. Sorry. You can watch us on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, on the Outlet.tv app, Facebook Watch, streaming with Pride on SVTV, and on Channel 31 on the East Coast. We proudly tape at UBM Go Studios, your one-place stop shop for podcasting. There you go. Okay, On the Rocks on the road. You want to come hang out with me? Buy me a drink? We're popping up all over the place for the next couple of months. I'm your MC for Out at the Fair, main stage at California State Fair with Patti LaBelle in Sacramento this Saturday, July 20th, all day. We'll be on the main stage, and at Washington County Fair in Hillsboro, Oregon, and I've never been, by the way. That's July 25th on Thursday. For more info where to get your tickets, go to outatthefair.com. We're also coming to Albuquerque and Orange County. Watch out, Orange County. I'm coming back for you. All right, let's get the show on the road. We have so much to talk about. We got all your questions. Alonso Duralde. It's such a fancy name. It's like from Princess Bride or something. He's a chief U.S. film critic for The Film Verdict, author of Have Yourself a Movie Little Christmas, and co-author of I'll Be Home for Christmas Movies. He's the co-host of Canopies the Film Library, which just launched this June, by the way. He also co-hosts Linoleum Knife, Maximum Film, and Breakfast All Day podcast because he doesn't like to sleep. And he's also discussed film on CNN, PBS, TCM, and ABC, as well as in numerous documentaries. He pops up for Q&As all over the place, and his latest book, Hollywood Pride, a celebration of LGBTQ plus representation and perseverance in film. It's a read, honey. I'm telling you. We're going to talk all about it. Please welcome Alonso Duralde. I want to add De Perón after it. It's like...
my unrealized dream in this life is to be an answer in the New York Times crossword puzzle because I've got all the vowels in all the right places. Move over, Una O'Neill Chaplin. It's my time to shine.
100%. And weren't you on Jeopardy too?
I was on Jeopardy. I came in second.
What was that like, though?
It's true. It is an honor to be nominated in that case. Just getting on the show was thrilling. And then if you live in LA, what they do is they make you the backup.
Yeah.
So like in case somebody misses their flight or whatever. So it's kind of cool because as the backup, you get to like go in and practice and watch them tape stuff and without having to play. So I got to sort of absorb what was going on. And then when you come back to be on for real, you get to do the first show of the day. And I still didn't win. So whatever. But I did it and I get to say I did it. So that was pretty great.
Now, did they know what you do and then not have those categories or have those categories because they know you'd be good?
Oh, I don't know. They don't tell you. I think it just pops up. I mean, I got a Bee Gees category and I felt pretty good about that. So,
but they didn't do like film.
There was a Neil Simon category, so maybe.
Okay, all right. Well, we've seen you all over the place. We know your movie opinions from your critiques. We've seen you moderate I don't know how many panels and on TV. But I want to shift it back to little Alonso growing up. How did your family get from Spain to Georgia?
God, interesting question. So my parents were dating in Madrid. He was a doctor. She was a nursing student. And then,
that's a romance movie right there.
Right? Yeah. And they were hot. I have to say, my parents, the old pictures I'm impressed. So he got a chance to come to Emory University in Atlanta to do like a year-long fellowship or whatever. So he came and was like, I'm not going back. I'm not returning to, post World War II Spain where things kind of suck. I'm going to stick it out here in the United States. So he proposed to my mother by mail. And then
Did you put the ring in it?
no, that came later. But because an unmarried woman could not travel transatlantically by herself on the boat.
Crazy?
Yeah, no, without a chaperone, heaven forbid. So she actually got married in Spain with her brother standing in for my dad.
That's another movie.
Yeah, for sure. Comes over on the boat, meets him in Atlanta. The priest at Emory is like, I'm going to marry you guys again just to be on the safe side. This sounds a little hinky to me. And they stayed. And then, and I'm the youngest of 7 children. So it all worked out for them.
So that's what I want to ask. The youngest of 7 kids, I can imagine how full the house was. You probably didn't get first pick as to what to watch on TV. They weren't probably taking 7 kids to the movies. How did you first start interacting with film?
Well, when I was a kid, it was pretty much, I was just going along for the ride and stuff. But my mom really liked movies. She was a big Humphrey Bogart fan. She really liked Clark Gable. So, the TV would be on older movies with some frequency. And then I'm kind of a change of life baby. Like my oldest sister is 13 years older than me. So my oldest brother, who is 12 years older than me, graduates from college in the mid 70s and comes home from Harvard with all of these books about, MGM and Greta Garbo and, classic movies of the 30s and 40s, because there was a big revival of that kind of thing happening. Like in the Ivy League in the early 70s, that's like where the sort of Casablanca revival happened and the Marx Brothers and all that sort of stuff. So he brings these books home and I devour them, baby nerd that I am at 9 years old. And so, then I'm like marking the TV guide every week because this is still pre-cable, pre-VHS, and I'm just, looking for when the afternoon movie is going to be, a Hitchcock flick or whatever.
Now, when did you start getting that kind of idea that maybe your affliction for these kind of films and the pageantry and all that?
Affliction is a good word. Thank you.
When did you first kind of realize that maybe that and maybe your sexuality wasn't kind of like the rest of the boys that you were growing up with? Right.
It didn't occur to me that there was anything connected between the two for a long time.
We know now that's
sure, yeah.
100% true.
Of course, a 9-year-old who's like, watching, All About Eve on TV. What could be gay about that? I was the high school kid standing in the library reading Vito Russo's The Celluloid Closet next to the shelf and then putting it back on the shelf.
Before anybody saw you.
I was not going to check it out. I wasn't going to take, but I would stand in the stacks and just like start devouring it. So that was kind of my first inkling that there was a connection there.
How exciting is it for you? And I just want to put this on screen. This is my favorite book. It's not even a book; it's an experience that I've been through in a long time. How exciting is it for you to publish this? Which it's so easy to access the information in it. Mm-hmm. Meaning that if I'm new to films or if I'm new to queer cinema, and it's world history too. It's not just that. You lay it out so easily to saturate the information.
Oh, thank you.
So whether you are an aficionado of cinema, which I thought I was, which apparently I'm not, or if you're new to it, this is such a perfect guide. But how exciting is it for you to have been reading The Celluloid Closet, which and you reference that in the book, and then now you have your own. This is like...
Yeah, I mean,
Celluloid Closet 2.0.
It's exciting. I mean, I'm definitely standing on the shoulders of some real giants here. Vito Russo, obviously, but William Mann's book Behind the Screen, where he really did the legwork in terms of talking to people who had lived in and worked in Hollywood in the early years and sort of knew, what the layout was for queer people and, how they socialized or didn't socialize and that kind of thing. Ruby Rich's work, obviously, in not just coining the term new queer cinema, but all of her writing about that moment in film. So, yeah, I feel like I'm picking up from, what I've learned from a lot of people. And I'm hoping that this book now becomes part of the foundation for whatever the next thing to come along is.
Now, growing up with 7 siblings, or the youngest of 6 siblings, how do you, because you have such a strong voice in Hollywood now, we know, how do you keep your voice heard with all this noise in the house at the dinner table and like holidays and
that's
stuff? Probably
probably why I'm such a mouthy bitch, because, there was a lot of competition for just attention, No, I definitely, I think I was really accelerated in doing things like learning to speak and learning to read just because I was surrounded by older people all the time. And I was trying to keep up, and so, but they're great. I mean, I'm the one queer sibling, and I'm the one who is doing this, like 3 of my brothers and 1 of my sisters are all MDs, very, very doctor heavy family. But, I get to be the cool uncle in Los Angeles that my nieces and nephews come live with for the summer while they intern at some, entertainment thing. I
absolutely love that. So were you like on the debate team? Were you,
Yep.
did you do theater as a kid too?
I did. A little bit. I did one show in high school. I played like the older banker guy in You Can't Take It With You, and then I did a couple of shows in college and directed a show in college. But I was a debater, so that was definitely a thing where my friends and I were all into it, and every weekend it was another tournament at another school, and everybody was very hyper verbal and competitive, and it was a lot of fun.
I want to talk about divas. You cover divas in the book. You cover divas from the queer community. You cover divas who have been allies to us. What is it about us? And we know as kids growing up, before we know our sexuality, we know that we have this affection for and this connection with divas. What is it about the diva figure that we connect so strongly with as queer men?
God, that's a whole other book, and I don't even know that I'm the one to write it. But I mean, my personal theory, and take this for the nothing that it is worth, is I think that for little gay kids, there's something about a diva that is an example of strength that isn't tied into like other kind of machismo, So in other words, if Mary Tyler Moore can walk into a room and own that room because of her magnetism and her sense of humor and, her, flip, whatever it is that is compelling and making people pay attention, that's something that if you are a kid who can't throw a ball and doesn't, want to go hunting with your dad and doesn't, want to do the traditional stuff, straight kids get that from Charles Bronson. Straight kids get that from football heroes. Yeah. Gay kids get that from divas.
That makes total sense. Little hot topic here. Do we have any more divas in Hollywood?
Oh, I think it's an endless thing. I think every generation of gay men is going to find a diva to gravitate to, and older gay men will be like, well, I mean, in my day we had the real thing. But I think it's kind of the job of every generation to sort of find those role models and those sort of sources of strength.
You don't think social media and media in general has kind of chiseled away at the diva because now we know so much about our stars? There's no mystique. I can't name who I would think is a contemporary Hollywood diva.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you raise that's an interesting point, and I think certainly there is. I don't know, though, if it's always about mystery, though. I feel like Judy Garland, for instance, was always living right in front of you. And the tabloids and the press couldn't get enough of her slip-ups or whatever that was going on. So I don't know that it's not always Garbo. It's not always cloaked in mystery, I think, in more recent generations, people like Cher or Madonna or Bette Midler, my personal diva, Sandra Bernhard, I feel like they've been very media savvy and pretty front and center with stuff. I mean, have you read the Barbra Streisand memoir?
I'm the bad guy. I like Barbara, and I appreciate everything that she did in her early years and all of that. But I don't think I want to like listen to her or read.
I haven't listened to I have not given 2 days to listening to the book yet, but I read it and I devoured it. It was really entertaining.
All right. I would say my Hollywood diva is like Jessica Lange. Like, okay. To me, that's because she does have some mystique to her. Sure. But we know a lot about her too. But her interviews are just so compelling. You went to Vanderbilt.
Yes.
Was it a weird like culture shock or transition from leaving home to going to?
It was the South. I grew up in Atlanta, and then I was in Nashville, so not terribly. No,
but you were like on your own though, without like your whole family around, without that kind of system.
Well, again, though, I think that's where the change of life things comes in. By the time I got to high school, most of my older siblings were either off to college or out in the world doing their thing. So I kind of went from being like youngest child, fighting for scraps of food and attention at the table to sort of being the only one left at home, to being the person who was there when like my mom no longer knew how to cook for 3 people. So she would still like, we had an insane amount of leftovers because her whole mindset was like, well, 10 people are going to be eating this, right? So I had a little of both. So yeah, going away to college, it wasn't like I was suddenly like alone in the world. Like I'd already had a taste of it.
That was fresh.
Now, at what age did you like come out of the closet?
I came out, I was 20, almost 21. It was my last semester of college because I was thinking, all right, if my parents disown me, at least my education will have been paid for. And they didn't, and they were great. I mean, my mom had passed away by that point, but my dad, after a few rough patches, was terrific. But I just... You got to map these things out, So that was my strategy. So yeah, last semester of college, I came out, I got a boyfriend, the whole thing.
Now, what movies were you watching like right around that time?
I remember like before coming out, I remember seeing both My Beautiful Laundrette and Prick Up Your Ears with my best straight friend to whom I was not yet out. And I remember just sitting through both of those movies being like, okay, do not respond to anything, like just trying to keep this game face on, even though I was like, oh my God, So those definitely leap to mind. And then right after coming out, I remember seeing Parting Glances for the first time. And that movie really resonated for me because I had, I by that point I had a boyfriend. We'd moved in together, and there was a scene, just a little throwaway moment at the early on in the movie of like the two lead characters, and one of them's been jogging around Central Park, the other one's sitting on a park bench reading. They go back to their apartment. They start, making love, if you will. They're making out, and they fall backwards on the bed, and the camera pans down, and you see one of them use his feet to remove the other one's shoes. And I was like, ooh, I've done that.
Like, that's me.
And I felt recognized in a movie in that way for the first time. I'd been watching love stories my whole life, but like I was finally in one. So that was very exciting.
We have seen people in your career, you have seen the way people saturate films so differently. So my introduction to film was, I was that weird kid. I was an only kid. I had a single mom, so she was always working. So during the summer was the loneliest time because I didn't like kids my age and I didn't want to play in the street. I didn't want to do any of that. So the neighbor used to be in Hollywood in his heyday. He had a beta machine, and for the audience that doesn't know what a beta machine, it's a VCR. Yeah. Those that don't know what a VCR, it plays movies.
You got to keep working this one.
So he brought over a beta machine, and he had 100 black and white movies.
Oh, wow.
In this library was the films that we all should see, The Women, All About Eve. But then there was these nuggets, some that we've lost over time, with actors that some we've lost over time. And so those were my friends, summer after summer. And he would keep bringing more and more, and I couldn't saturate enough. Wow. And then my movie saturating experience changed when I moved to West Hollywood and I came out. It was going to the video store.
Right.
And it was
Video West?
Video West. And having Leslie Jordan front pay for his gay porn in coins. And he was so proud of it. Like, that was him.
R.I.P.
Yeah. But it wasn't just about getting the new release or the film that everybody was talking about. Sure. It was seeing the rows and rows of colorful covers of DVDs. Yeah. And being introduced to stuff I like, oh, I didn't know, there was that. I got introduced to, I had never seen Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte. I had never seen Absolutely Fabulous.
Oh, wow.
And so you would just grab stuff and that's how you would build it.
Sure.
And then TCM was always on TV every Saturday and Sunday at home during the day. Growing up, that was just it. My mom loved classic films. The Thin Man was her favorite series.
Nice.
But now that whole kind of experience is gone. Now we stream everything and we're kind of told what to stream, what to watch.
Right.
Unless you know of a title or of an actor to go searching for it. We know TCM is a bit on a decline. It's not, it doesn't have, from my point of view, and, I know you work hand in hand with them.
Right. I mean, I obviously they are a cable channel and cable is having a moment, but I think that, and I mean, I get what you're asking, I think, which is sort of like, how do we teach the children?
No, honestly. So I went on a date with somebody. He didn't know Judy Garland.
Okay.
Clearly had no idea who Betty Davis was or even whatever happened to Baby Jane.
Sure.
This is just in my lexicon and my whatever. And I didn't even know he didn't even know Golden Girls.
My God.
But unless he had been exposed like I had, how is the younger generation supposed to learn classic Hollywood, not even to mention classic queer Hollywood?
Right. Well, I don't know. I mean, because here's the thing. I come from the generation like I didn't have a VCR until I was like a junior or senior in high school. So by the time video stores became a thing, like I already knew what I was looking for, but I'm a weirdo. So like maybe I'm the last person to answer this question, but I mean, I think that there have always been, kinds of curation. So for me, it was the books that my brother brought home, and whether it was about going down the rabbit hole of trying to see all the films by a certain director or certain actor, or, I had a book that was just called like, 50, unforgettable films, blah, blah, blah. And that was the first book that sort of made me realize, oh, Citizen Kane, that's a thing. I need to see that. I actually got my mom to drive me across town in Atlanta to see it at a rep theater when I was 11, because like it never came on TV and I needed to see Citizen Kane. So stuff like that was how I did it and how I found it. And then, for your generation, it was, the video store. And I think now there is, for better or worse, the internet, which is not always reliable. But I think that, you've got Letterboxd, you've got there's so many podcasts that are exclusively about older stuff, whether it's, something like Ticklish Business, where they just kind of dig into movies and stars that they love, or something like You Must Remember This, where they kind of branch out into specific areas of history. So, I look, I hear you.
It makes me really concerned, to be honest, because let's say a young gay guy's gonna stream Bros. There's not a pop-up to be like, do you know who Betty Davis is? Have you checked out Betty Davis's films? Do you know Now Voyager? There's none of that. No. So unless you're looking for a podcast that deals with that, or unless you're searching Betty Davis films,
right,
our youth is not going to be exposed to it unless you take a class, which this should be a textbook
thank you.
in queer studies to begin with, not just queer cinema studies, but this is our history.
I'll tell you, you had Dude with a Betamax. And so I think very often it is the role of the aging gay man to be like, hey, youngster, have you seen, All About Eve yet? Do you know about Thelma Houston, whatever it is, and I think that's just how things get passed along. And I'm sure the same stuff, if you were talking to like people who were hardcore book folks, it's like, how do I get young people to read Francois Sagan or, whatever?
You can't even read a caption on Instagram. How are they going to read a book?
I think that's kind of what it is, and there is, these TikTok film critics out there. I understand. I'm not on TikTok. I'm too ancient for it. But like,
start it. There's Book Talk.
Yes, there's Book Talk for sure. So yeah, I think that always there's going to be people like us who are not just sort of passive consumers of this stuff, but enthusiastic proselytizers, And so this show or your Instagram feed or my Instagram feed or whatever, like you just talk about this stuff and somebody stumbles upon it and goes, I never heard of that. And then they go check it out. And one of the most gratifying things for me is always like, for Linoleum Night, for Breakfast All Day, or any of those podcasts, and now with the Film Library, a Canopy podcast, when people go, I had never heard of blah, and then you talked about it and I went and saw it and I'm so glad I did. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of all we can do.
Well, and you connect the dots so well from movies, even from way, way, in the back, how it all connects. And like the young people don't realize the Real Housewives of OC, it's like a reiteration of the women,
Sure.
It's that kind of energy and that's that kind of sass. And TCM has done such a great job on their Instagram. They're posting snippets of some of the sassy stuff that people are now sharing. And so that's a way too, I think people are excited. Like, that was in black and white and they were saying that because you have to be smart to get a lot of these jokes. But, that's what was happening.
Sometimes 20 seconds is all you need,
Yeah. You first started being a film critic. You worked for MSNBC. Your critiques were like on Rotten Tomatoes show. Your first critique job as a critic, did you feel like you needed to come in with a heavy hand, or you felt like, or not because you wanted to?
Well, again, I started before there was an internet, so it wasn't like the kind of thing where like, ooh, I got to get the hot takes to really, get the attention. It was just more kind of learning the craft, So I wrote, excuse me. I wrote reviews like for my high school paper and for my college paper, and then for the Nashville Banner for a while, where I interned, after graduating, and then I reviewed for like the gay paper in Dallas, The Voice, which is still out there. So it was just kind of a thing of finding what my voice was and trying to figure out like how do I bring me to this without having it just be I. There's that there's that thing that critics have to sort of figure out. And I think we spend most of our careers trying to figure out how to do it, which is the mixture of, this is what I understand as somebody who has studied the art form and is interested in the art form and knows the history of it and has watched a lot of things. But also, this is what I bring to the table as a human being who has gone through whatever things in life, that color my judgment or that make me like or dislike certain things or that make me relate to certain things or whatever like that. So yeah, it was just kind of more of a question of just trying to get better as a writer and reading other critics and looking back at my stuff and being like, oh, that was good. Oh, that was terrible. I'm very tough on my own copy, but usually when it's far too late to do anything about it.
And you've been reviewing movies for so long. You go to how many screenings, I don't know, per week.
Oof.
Are you ever able to just sit back and enjoy a movie at this point?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I still, in my free time, that is still my favorite thing to do. LA has such a wealth of repertory theaters, to go see something at the Academy Museum or at the Egyptian or at the the New Beverly or whatever, or to, pop in a Blu-ray at home or to go through a streaming service. Yeah, I have made my avocation my vocation, but my avocation is still my avocation.
So you can turn it off and just...
Yeah.
What's a guilty pleasure movie from present day? You're like, oh.
Well, I don't believe in the guilty pleasure concept. If it gives you pleasure, it gives you pleasure.
But you're a film critic. If they know that you liked Ernest Goes to Camp, I mean...
Look, I co-wrote an entire book about Hallmark Christmas movies. I watch a lot of Hallmark Christmas movies. People know this about me. It is not a secret. So clearly I understand the difference. I'm not going to say those are cinema, but they do give me pleasure.
And they've evolved. Now they're including queer characters.
Very much
and
so.
I have to tell you, every Christmas season, my mom and I would sit and watch the worst ones, and it was a bonding experience for them. We looked forward to them.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Hallmark Christmas movies, I think, is that, as I always like to remind people, this is a network that is owned by a greeting card company. And in the same way that when you get a greeting card that has a beautiful snowy scene on the front, and you put it up on the mantle, and you look up occasionally and go, oh yeah, the snow, it's Christmas.
Yeah.
These movies kind of serve that purpose.
Yeah.
They're there to be on your screen, and you look up and you see people making cookies or lighting a tree or shopping for a wreaths or whatever, and you go, oh, it's Christmas.
Yeah.
And that's it. That is the function they serve. And if occasionally we get more than that, great. That's a bonus. But it's just they are there to be the thing you're paying the third most attention to.
And there's a safety to come home knowing what the storyline's going to be, knowing how it's going to end up. There's a comfort there.
I always say it is ideal nursing home programming because you can fall asleep in the middle of one of them, wake up in the middle of the next one, and you know exactly where you are in the plot.
You're like, Lacey Chabert is still there?
But her hair's different.
That's a different man.
But I genuinely love them, and they have brought me, I started watching them, when politics really just started taking a turn in this country, so circa 2015. And they have really been my Xanax ever since. Like, they are my place to go. When I am very decidedly not watching the news, I am probably watching a Hallmark Christmas movie.
Okay, all right. You talk about independent filmmaking from the queer community.
Sure.
As it relates to the big studios. And what I love, what you do is like I said, you put like the world history, you put U.S. history, you put what was going on behind the scenes with censorship and the ratings with films and how that affected. You talk about the rise of independent filmmaking, and you also talk about gay porn a little bit, which was independent filmmaking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Telling our stories and filming stories.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If you wanted to see a portrayal of gay life, whether it was urban life or in the country or whatever, in the early 70s, that was pretty much where you were going to find it, was in, gay adult cinema. And, I'd say in the kind of what I call the pre-VHS era, there was an attempt to tell certain kinds of stories and present certain kinds of characters because, it's not like Stonewall suddenly made gay people happen.
Yeah.
Like, we'd been around, but obviously there was this kind of growing subculture, and there is always a hunger, I think, for people to see their lives reflected back to them on the screen. We all crave that from movies, whether it's, aspirational or vicarious or whatever. Like, we want that feeling of being involved with the story and figuring out, like, how would that be me in this situation? And so, Yeah, I think that, when there were, actual queer independent films, before studios, heaven forbid, wanted to have queer leading characters, porn is where you found it.
That was fresh.
Now, in terms of independent films, we know some of them have been great films. We know, like, late 90s, early 2000s, there was a lot, because technology was getting easier for people to film stuff.
Sure.
There was a lot of, I hate to say it, in my opinion, there was a lot of crap, queer, independent films. Our friends in our circle would be like, hey, I'm in a new web series. And we'd be like, oh, God, please. Or, come see a screening of our $300 budget film. The acting is usually bad because the budgets are bad. It's just, as a film critic and as part of the industry, should we be more focused on promoting queer content because it's out there and we should give it credence? Or should we be holding our community to a higher standard? Be like, no, you want to be a film, be a film. That was crappy.
I mean, I don't know about a higher standard, but I think you want to hold them to the same standard.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as one friend of mine says, 85% of everything is crap. And
that explains my boyfriends.
Boom. But what was, as there were more and more queer films, that meant that the 15% was growing. It also meant the 85% was growing, So there was more stuff to sift through to find, what the gems were. But yeah, no, I think, you certainly, in my position, like when I was an editor at The Advocate, for instance, there would be stuff that you would cover because you wanted people to know about it and know that it existed and that it was out there. But when it came time to actually review it, you had to be like, well, this is inept. This is not well acted. This is not well written. The lighting is terrible, whatever it was. And I think there are accommodations you can make. I mean, you can have a film that is really well acted and really well written, and if the lighting is subpar, you're 100%. Like, okay, well, yeah, it doesn't look great, but you're going to go for the story, go for the characters, whatever. But I mean, yeah, I don't think that queer people should be giving queer art a pass for existing.
I made fun of that. I didn't make fun of. I just talked about I didn't really care for the Eating Out series, and I got so much hate when it's like, that's content from our community, and you should just be supporting it. I'm like, but it's terrible. But I got that comment. Now we see more queer content on sitcoms, major networks, cable, on big screen. Like now we're making our own movies.
Sure.
Do you think the independent queer filmmaking industry is at risk of disappearing because now we're going to the main theater?
No.
Okay, great.
No, I do not. Because here's the thing. I think that television. Sorry,
You're getting so emotional. You talk about Hallmark films, you get all emotional.
I'm a talker, but even you're straining my limits here. I think
it is a talk show,
I know that I was misinformed. I had my dance number ready to go. I think that television is allowed to take more chances because it's cheaper, it's focused on certain markets, whereas I think studio filmmaking, for the most part, especially the current state of studio filmmaking, where they aren't interested in making a $25 million drama aimed at adults. They want to make a $250 million superhero movie aimed at everybody. They want that movie to open in all parts of the world, including ones where any kind of queer content gets banned or censored. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we can ever rely on the mainstream to sweep in and tell our stories for us. I think that queer independent cinema is always going to be important and necessary. And it's where we're going to get, I think, the truest depictions of our lives and who we are, because that isn't necessarily going to be marketable to a large audience, but it's going to be important art that the people making it felt they had to make.
Like I said, I thought I knew about our own queer cinema until I read your book. I was like, damn, I didn't realize how early Boys in the Band came out. And I didn't realize what a big scale. We had the remake recently, right. But I didn't realize how early in filmmaking that was.
Yeah, that was a 1970 movie.
That's insane. When I read that date, I was like, oh, it must be a misprint. But no, because I thought it was 80s or something.
No. The play, had been a big hit in the 60s already. So in 70 they make the movie and they bring over the entire Broadway cast. And it's directed by William Friedkin, who I think, we're all still arguing about cruising, and we probably always will be. But
I loved reading that part in this book too. It's juicy because you present all the facts.
Yeah, I think there are multiple ways to look at that movie and to think about that movie. But one of the things that I think is cool about Friedkin as a filmmaker. And, you forget this when you think about The French Connection and Sorcerer, these big sprawling movies. He's really good at making these very intimate theater to film adaptations. So often the temptation is got to open it up, everybody's got to go outside, we got to do things so it doesn't feel stage bound. And he's like, oh no, we're not leaving this room. We're not leaving this room, and we're going to close the windows, and everyone's going to start sweating, and we're going to be in this room with the windows closed. And that's what he does in Boys in the Band. He does it later in Bug and Killer Joe. I so wish he had done the August Osage County movie.
That film was good though, but I see what you're saying. It wasn't as claustrophobic as it should have been.
Because he had done other Tracy Letts adaptations, and I think that movie, you needed to feel those people trapped and breathing each other's hot air and driving each other crazy, and it's not that.
Yeah. Okay, hot topic. There's more water. We have tons of water.
I know.
I'll bring in a water truck for you.
I should have brought my apple cider vinegar and done a quick gargle midway through. That'd be fun.
Why didn't Bros work?
I think aesthetically it worked. Why didn't it make money? I think there was a combination of factors. I think that
because it had plenty of marketing.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I never underestimate the power of an opening date. That movie was supposed to open in August, and then they kicked it to late September because Mission Impossible 7, whatever, moved. And they're like, oh, great, we'll get this date. And it wound up being... Was it late or early October? Anyway, it was kind of Halloween was happening. And so everybody went to see Smile. Everybody was watching Hocus Pocus 2 on Disney Plus. And
don't get me started.
I shan't. But people didn't go. And I mean, there are multiple factors going on. Judd Apatow, as a producer, when he would spotlight relatively new talent in movies, people like Amy Schumer, people like Seth Rogen, he would surround them with famous names, and that would kind of help draw people in. And in this movie, they made the, I think, bold and brilliant choice to have the entire cast be queer. Every single person in that movie is LGBTQ plus. And so, yes, you have a cameo from Harvey Fierstein. You have a few scenes with Amanda Bierce. But for the most part, you have these really talented performers, but who are not marquee names. Yeah. And so maybe that made it a harder sell because as much as we love Billy Eichner and Luke McFarlane, they are not names that open a movie, So I hope that time is kind to Bros, because I think it's a great movie. I think it's brilliant and funny. And I think a very insightful movie about why adult gay men have a hard time with intimacy and why they have a hard time being vulnerable and opening themselves up to relationships. It doesn't feel like a movie where they took a straight rom-com and just changed half the pronouns. It feels very specific about what it means to be an adult who grew up queer in this country, in this culture, in this society. And, I some of my favorite movies tanked in theaters and then found an audience later. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Clue, the list goes on and on. So I hold out hope that people will discover Bros, because I think it's a great movie.
But how they were trying to sell it is, this is a rom-com that straight couples will go to. And it's no, that's not. And is that even the point?
Yeah.
Just because we go see straight rom-coms.
Right, exactly. When you think they owe us one. I think, well, you can't mark it as this is not a movie for straight people. Don't bother, stay home. You can't say that. You have to try and get them to come in the theater. And I think if they did, they would like it. But yeah, that wasn't necessarily the principal goal. I don't know. There's so much about movie marketing and all that stuff is such a did the turtle's egg fall off the roof? We're going to send our ships to sea. It's so random. And so you just don't ever know, oh shit, there's going to be a rainstorm that makes the East Coast stay home. It's so random. So I think in the case of Bros, the movie's great. It didn't do the numbers they wanted, but I do hope that its day will come.
I thought when it went to streaming, it was going to be the top stream, and that's where it was going to gain, and it just didn't. Plus, I think our younger generation, we talk about our younger generation. I don't mean to crap on our younger generation. But like they're mean about things before they even see or know anything about it. Fire Island, when that was going to come out, people were crucifying it. Now it was successful. Bros, that was another. The New Queer as Folk, it was dead even before it even started because people just start. It's like, don't we want to like these things? Don't we want to support them? And then if it's bad, then we can say it's bad.
Well, I think there's a difference in terms of how we look at queer media. In that, for my generation and for yours to a certain extent, it was so rare that anything would happen on a big scale. That something like Showtime's original Queer as Folk, the remaking the British series would happen, or that like Brokeback Mountain would come out. Like it was a moment, it was an event, and everybody got pumped for it because we thought, all right, maybe this will be great, and who knows, if it does well, maybe we'll get like another one. I mean, I was at the Advocate from 2000 to 2006, and believe me, we were like, please let Brokeback Mountain be a success and let there be other ones like it. And we got half of what we wanted. But I think that the kids now are, they take this for granted. Like they have always had YouTube. They have always lived in a world where Will and Grace existed.
100%.
And so they don't have to get excited about this stuff. And in a way, that's a good thing that each of these releases isn't this moment in time that, isn't going to happen again for years. And so when you get used to that being part of the cultural landscape, you don't have to be pumped about it. You can be like, well, what do you got? Impress me, And so, yeah, I get it. And that's just, I think, it's a marker of a good thing that happened. But yeah, it is tough on those works now trying to reach that audience.
What I love about Hollywood Pride, and I'm going to hold it up again, you talk about the young generation taken for granted. What I love what you do in the book, we've all read the rumors about Katharine Hepburn and
Cary Grant.
Cary Grant. I mean, the list goes on. Marlon Brando, James Dean, and you even talk about in the book, you're like, we've already heard all those stories, so I'm not going to dwell on those figures because those stories and rumors are out there. You really do focus on figureheads from the very early on that have done so much to bring us to where we are now. And I love that because I've learned so much about just filmmaking from behind the scenes. It's just not the stars you do it to.
Right.
You're talking about like the wig people and the costumers and all of that. That's what I really love. You also talk about how movies have always been successful in times of catastrophe for the U.S., such as war is very good because people need that escape, and it was patriotic at a time to go see these films.
During World War II, they created like a special tax on movie tickets that went to the war effort, and so not only did people want to go to the movies because they needed the escapism and the distraction, but the act of going to movies felt patriotic. It was like buying a bond. That you were buying a ticket to a theater, and so like the American film industry will never be as successful as it was during World War II. I mean, it was just massive. We didn't have TV. People would go multiple times a week. The Aero Theater in Santa Monica is called the Aero Theater, the AERO, because it was near one of the munitions factories, where they made aircraft.
I did not know that.
And so it would be open all night. So if you did a late shift and you got off work at like 4 a.m. and you were keyed up and didn't want to go to bed yet, you could go to the Aero and see a movie. So it was a part of the fabric of American life in a way that we will never see again. But yeah, I think in general, it has been kind of a proven thing that the worse things are in the world, the more people crave the experience of going to the movies.
So let's relate that to COVID. We know the box office from COVID has been an uphill battle, even with mega blockbusters.
Sure.
And we know that people are watching stuff at home. I get that. But it doesn't seem to have been that escapism after COVID that we've seen with all the other catastrophes through the U.S.
I think COVID is kind of unique because it was a catastrophe that kept us from going to the movies,
right?
For one thing. So that's unique. And then, because of that, you had an audience that was already getting accustomed to seeing films at home, to streaming titles, to having
a big flat screen TV.
Yeah, exactly. On much better equipment than anybody's ever had in their homes before. And so, once the theaters opened up again, they had to contend with not just that people were more used to streaming, but the knowledge that the windows have gotten a lot shorter. That it's like, well, if I don't go see this movie now, in a month, I can rent it for $20 on Amazon, And so that factors in. And I think there is still a hungry audience that wants to see movies on the big screen, that definitely wants to see certain kinds of films with a big audience, the fact that like the number one movie this past weekend was a low budget horror film is exciting.
Is that?
It's exciting because it
Nicolas
means
Cage is like, oh, I can pay rent this month.
for sure, But I think that people are like, yeah, we want it. We've heard good things about this movie, and I want to be scared in a big dark room with a bunch of strangers. There is something unique about that experience, and so I think it's still there. I think people are still craving it. It's just going to be a matter of all the other shit that's going on right now with the strikes and with, the studios being slow to get back to work and all that other stuff. But I hold hope in my heart that the movies will get past this bump and continue to be a thing.
And for me, watching a movie is that movie going experience. Mm-hmm. It's getting the popcorn before, it's watching every single trailer. When my friends be like, oh, well, they'll do 15 minutes of trailers. I'm like, yeah, we need to be seated for those 15 minutes of trailers.
Maria Menounos is coming on the screen and I'm in there.
That woman is everywhere. I can go get gas and there she is. I worked on her network for a little bit. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's all I'm going to say about that.
That was fresh.
There's so much we have to get through, and we got a lot of your questions. Because you have covered uncharted territory in this book with so much research, I can't even imagine where you started, what your creative process was.
Luckily I had some guidelines because this book is sort of following in the footsteps of a couple of other books that TCM and Running Press put out in recent years. There was Hollywood Black from Donald Bogle, which was, a history of Hollywood and black filmmakers and actors, and which actually is now going to be a miniseries on MGM Plus, the executive produced by Forrest Whitaker and the wonderful friend Justin Simeon, who directed Dear White People and the Haunted Mansion movie. They put this thing together. I cannot wait to see it. So I had Bogle's book. I had Luis Reyes's Viva Hollywood, which was the Hispanic Latine history of the same thing. So it kind of gave me an idea of like going chronologically and sort of highlighting certain people and certain films and using that as a structure. But, like you, I think I walked into this project thinking, I got this. I know this. And then constantly discovering people I didn't know about, films I didn't know about, sort of historical turns that I wasn't aware of. So yeah, it's, it was, luckily I had a bit of a roadmap going in, but definitely a lot of learning curve too.
I mean, even from the first pages, like the first motion picture, among the first very few motion pictures was two guys dancing.
Yeah.
I mean, that blew my mind. And then, Louise Brooks being in Pandora's Box, like these films, I'm like, oh yeah, I know. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize all the dots that connected.
Yeah.
One of the questions we got, and I had the same thought too, we have figures like Marlene Dietrich, we have Paul Lynde, we had George Cukor, like everybody knew what was going on.
Uh-huh.
How come they got away with their queerness where a lot of people did not?
Interesting question. I mean, I think that, they're all kind of different. I mean, Cukor was behind the scenes. So I didn't think there was
everybody knew.
Right, everybody knew, but it was like
Clark Gable was like,
well, yeah, that's a story. But I think that it wasn't like he was a matinee idol that it was going to make a difference. In the case of Dietrich, I think the fact that she was so European and so androgynous that it was kind of like, it's just part of her mystique, And Paul Lynde, I think, tragically was kind of, I think lived in the closet, really.
I mean, listen to every joke on Hollywood Squares.
I know. I mean, he was in that category where he got to be flamboyant, but I'm sure like had very strict rules about what people didn't know about his life, and I think sadly, because he was a character actor and a comedic character actor, it was sort of like, oh, he's the funny uncle, I think if he had stepped up and wanted to play romantic leads, it would have been like, girl, no.
Well, did you see the pilot of his sitcom that somebody just released it on YouTube? It's so awful because he's playing like a dad and
oh no, that was an actual show. The Paul Lynde show aired like 13 episodes where he's like he's a stuffy conservative judge and his family is more like getting into the spirit of the freewheeling 70s. Yeah, it's a terrible show. It works exactly against everything he's good at.
You talk about some of the mainstream films of late, and we films So I grew up in like conservative Orange County, and I would go to the movies with my mom and my grandma, and I would always sit in the middle, and that was like part of our experience. So growing up, like Tu Wong Fu, Priscilla Queen of the Desert, In and Out, The Birdcage, everyone was going to see these films. Everybody was laughing at them. I sat in packed theaters where everybody was just, when Kevin Kline kissed Tom Selleck, like, woo! Everybody cheered. With these fun comedies, how come audiences were still hard to convince to vote for our rights, to vote for same-sex marriage, when people were just enjoying these movies? People like my grandma were enjoying these movies.
Well, there's a saying that the personal is political, but not everybody knows that or understands that. And so I think that there are a lot of people who can see a movie like The Birdcage and find it amusing and like, oh, those two men are so sweet or whatever, and then not really think about the fact that, oh, I'm now going to go vote for this guy who's going to like strip them of their rights. I think that's a connection that we have to make with people. And I think that one of the most effective things that queer people can do with the people in their lives, the people who love them, is sort of gently say like, look, I know we don't have the same opinions about everything, and I know that we don't necessarily agree, politically, but you need to understand that voting for this person has a real impact on my life in a negative way. This person is out to destroy what, my partner and I have built, or what my whatever, and I think that very often that's why, like Harvey Milk and everybody's always talked about, why it's so important to come out. It's very easy for people to think of queer people as this amorphous them. They're out there and they're a threat to my family and they want bad things and they are whatever. But when them becomes my cousin Frank, that changes everything. And so, I think it's up to cousin Frank to then tell the rest of the family, look, I need you to understand that this politician that you support for whatever other reasons you might like is going to, mess my life up in a serious way. And I need you to really think twice about what you're doing when you vote for him and what that says to me.
You also talk about some of the big Oscar films that we've had: Philadelphia, Brokeback Mountain, Boys Don't Cry, Dallas Buyers Club, Oscar contenders.
Oscar winners.
Oscar winners. Made by A-listers, obviously straight A-listers.
Sure.
And now, we have this hot topic of gay playing gay, trans playing trans, where the reality is, I see it, if we didn't have these A-listers in these movies, they wouldn't have been Oscar winners and contenders. And we still, in my mind, don't have A-list blockbuster queer actors to put in these roles. But we're having a different conversation. We're being more forceful to get our representation. Do you think it helped building a bridge, like I said, with the other side? Or what is your take on A-listers playing our queer roles?
I think it's kind of two separate questions. I think in terms of playing like gay, lesbian, bisexual roles, it's not my favorite, but I get it. If it's somebody who can get a movie made and they're coming at it in good faith and with the right attitude.
I mean, we love it when Stanley Tucci does it, but then we hate it when James Corden does it. Where's the difference there?
I look, my solution is we need more queer A-listers, and we get queer A-listers by letting queer people play whatever they want. I think the thing about cis actors playing trans roles is a different issue. And there are people who can explain this in a better way than I do, but for me, it sort of boils down to I think for a lot of people, they think that a trans identity is somehow a costume or an illusion or a trick, as opposed to a lived experience. And I think that, a hunky cisgender actor putting on a wig and a dress is different than a trans actor playing that experience. And so I understand the distinction there. And I think that it is important for trans actors to play those roles, especially because, with very few exceptions, but the only one that leaps to mind is Patty Harrison in Together, we almost never cast trans actors in cis roles. So if we're not going to cast trans actors in cis roles, and we're not going to cast trans actors in trans roles, what are we casting trans actors as? Right. There's a lot of talented trans actors who should be working. And so let's demand the trans roles for now, and let's, get some trans stars out of this, hopefully. And then we can have a conversation about, who's an A-lister and who should be playing what.
I remember when I first realized that conversation was starting was Felicity Huffman played a trans character, and everybody loved her, and she got
Oscar nomination.
Yeah, everything. And then Jared Leto was in.
Right. But that's the difference between a cis woman playing a trans woman and a cis man playing a trans woman.
But that's when I realized the conversation, the trans community and the queer community was starting to come out and say, no, this is not for us. And I remember that was the first time I'd kind of seen that shift. We have so much to talk about. And like I said, so many topics that you cover. I want to talk about what kind of content we can expect. You talk about the camp films during a certain time of U.S. history, and it was very appropriate for our community to be doing that. Obviously, during the 80s and 90s, we were really concerned with the AIDS epidemic, so a lot of it was intense, dreary, dramatic pieces that we saw carry on, that every gay filmmaker was like, I got to make this piece because this is what we wanted to hear. Now, in my opinion, present day, we're really concerned with rom-coms and comedy and, making it light. But now we look on the horizon, what's going to happen socially and politically. What is happening socially and politically. Yeah. What do you think our queer content's going to look like?
Well, I think that we are in the midst of a new trans cinema. We're getting really exciting films like I saw the TV Glow and People's Joker. So I think we're getting more trans filmmakers getting to have that moment in the spotlight where they are, making feature films, telling their stories in a very unique way. I think both of those movies sort of use familiar pop culture tropes and characters to explore what a trans coming out process looks like. And so, because I think trans people are being so demonized in the public sphere, they have become this convenient other for this new wave of fascism to attack, which is, we're playing the oldies here. This is what the Nazis did in the 30s. The trans community was one of their first targets. I think it's great that we have so many great trans artists stepping up and telling, sharing their truths and telling their stories. And so I hope we get more of that. I hope we get more, I love queer comedies. I love, if people, I think Bottoms is one of the greatest films of the last 10 years. Like it is a movie that feels like it's rewriting the rules of what comedy even is. But, I think also we're going to see art that is responding to the moment that we're in. And I hope doing so in a way that is as powerful and effective as so many of the new queer cinema films were about, AIDS and other things that were happening in the culture of that era. So I believe in our ability to step up, and this is a moment to step up.
Another theme that you talk about, which delights me, because I love Alfred Hitchcock. I love everything Alfred Hitchcock. Gus Van Sant's remake. We had Aisha on the show, and she talked about that whole experience. And I had known about some of the queer sensibility in his stuff, like The Rope and Psycho.
Sure.
You have a whole section in the book that my eyes just bugged open because you talk about all of his films, and there's this queer sensibility and texture in almost everything. Was Hitchcock aware of that? What did it add to his pieces? That made it so magic.
He knew what he was doing. I mean, and not every one of his films because he was real prolific, but definitely in every decade there was a handful of. I was
going through
movies.
title and title. I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, oh my god, yes.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes sense. The way you put it together made total sense.
Oh well, thank you. I mean, yeah, I think he absolutely knew what he was doing, and whether look, what I'm sure there are more books to be written about speculations about what Hitchcock's actual sexuality was, but I think that he liked sort of tweaking notions of movie tropes. I think part of it was just seeing what he could get away with, in the Hays Code era. But he would do things like throw in, you know, like in The Lady Vanishes, you get Caldecott and Charters, who are these two gentlemen traveling companions who were just, all they talk about is cricket. But like, you know, they share a room and they share a pair of pajamas. And it's like, okay, what's going on here? You know, Strangers on a Train is suffused with, you know, queerness. And, you know, Martin Landau in North by Northwest, or, you know, Mrs. Danvers and Rebecca. Like, there are all these queer characters that pop up. And then you have him playing around with the notion of like casting queer actors in these kind of nefarious roles, whether it is to sort of tie into the idea of like, these are men who know how to live with a secret, or who are like presenting, you know, two identities to the world. And that goes all the way back to like the silent era with, you know, Ivor Novello and The Lodger, and then kind of finds its peak with, you know, Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates in Psycho.
And you also bring up a theme, we're not going to go into it, but get the book. You talk about queer characters being the villains. Mm-hmm. Whereas fun villains, but also, you know, murderers and horrible people who commit suicide because they can't handle their queerness. And that's very dangerous because, like, yeah, we're getting the representation, but also we're being put out this way.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when the Code era ended, it was like, okay, we can have queer people in movies now, but movies are, for the most part, still being made by straight white guys. So we're going to get like either whipping boys or, you know, murderers or whatever. And so, yeah, again, I think it's when you start having more queer people behind the camera that you start seeing, you know, better representations in front of the camera.
That was fresh.
Personally, okay, so your newest podcast, The Film Library, it's on Canopy, and Canopy is with a K.
Yes.
And I had never heard of this service until your podcast launched in June. And if you don't know about it, you have to know there's 30,000 films that matter. Yeah. And it's free through the public library system and the college system, which is amazing. Yeah. I didn't even know that.
I have been proselytizing for Canopy for years. Like a good friend of mine who's a film critic, Manola Dargis of the New York Times. I adore her. She was like, do you know about Canopy? And I didn't. And I, you know, got my library card out and signed up and was like, oh my God, where has this thing been? And they have this incredible library of, you know, Criterion titles and A24 titles, but like a deep well of Hollywood and independent and foreign films, documentaries at the yin yang, like all the films of the great Frederick Wiseman, and a very healthy LGBTQ plus section. I have to say, like, I will just stroll through it and I'm like, oh my God, they have this. I haven't even seen this one yet. So yeah, when the chance came to do a podcast with them, I was thrilled because I'm not the kind of podcaster who like has advertisers, you know, and so I've never had to be in that situation where I'm like, hey, you know, buy this boxed mattress, even though I don't use this boxed mattress. But like, I love Canopy. I was already a fan. So it's very easy for me to go out there and like kind of, you know, bang the gong about it.
All right. So if I'm getting into queer cinema and I'm going to Canopy, what 3 titles should I start with? Something from classic, contemporary classic, and maybe something more present.
Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, like, again, the aforementioned Parting Glances is there. So, you know, definitely give that one a twirl. You know, and, you know, Boys in the Band, as we discussed from 1970 is there. You know, and then they have a lot of really amazing contemporary stuff. One of my favorite films of last year that I feel like nobody saw was an Italian movie called L'Immensità, which starred Penelope Cruz as she's an Italian housewife in the 70s, whose oldest child is clearly like, is, you know, identified female as at birth, but is clearly trans and is, you know, going to live a life as a boy. And the kid is sort of figuring that out for themselves. And the mom is the one person who really understands this. And it's a very autobiographical film. Emmanuel Creales, who made the film, is a trans man and grew up in Italy in the early 70s. And the film has such beautiful, like, just texture of family life and the amazing just 70s, you know, the outfits and the design and everything, and these wonderful flights of fantasy that are these impromptu musical numbers, but also like just a really great queer coming of age story. And that was a movie that, like, when it was in theaters, then when it went to streaming, I was like,
go home and watch it tonight.
Yeah, go see it. And now it's on Canopy. I'm like, go see it for free with your library card, you know?
Amazing. It's such an honor to chat with you because I've been such a fan.
Thank you. This has been a treat.
You doing all of these podcasts and going to all these films. Do you ever get tired of talking about movies or the queer community? And I don't mean tired like in a flippant way, but sometimes we just get mentally exhausted of what we talk about all the time.
I mean, yeah, believe me, I'm trying to learn how to crochet. I need something that isn't this, to occupy my time. Just
Tom Daly's going to be doing it at the Olympics. Like, it's how he calms down. It's how he,
every so often I've got to unplug. But yeah, I mean, I think, in the same way that you get tired of, chocolate, whatever, too much of anything.
Look at me. Does it look like I get tired of chocolate?
Okay, bad example. But no, I love what I do, and I have the immense privilege to do this thing that I love so much, and that has always been like one of my big interests in life, and that I somehow managed to cobble it into something resembling a career. So I'm very lucky that way.
That's absolutely amazing. And your husband's a film critic too, right?
He is. Yeah.
Are you able to watch movies together?
Well, that's why we started a podcast, was because people enjoyed it when we argued.
I love that.
So we do. And we don't always argue. We agree more than we disagree, probably. But, every so often we have a moment.
I mean, I was raised, and we have a picture of you and Leonard Maltin. I was raised watching Leonard Maltin and Roger Ebert. And I was obsessed with how they would critique a film. It was just...
No,
but you got to... this is part of your world. That must... Looking back at that little kid in Georgia, I mean, that must just blow your mind.
I feel like how probably a lot of firemen and ballerinas feel, in that I am doing the thing that I wanted to do when I was a very young kid. Yeah. Like, I mean, Siskel and Ebert started airing on PBS when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And that was what I wanted to do. And here I am.
Yeah, that's just insane to me. If we were to name 3 movies that changed your life, it doesn't have to be queer.
Okay.
But like 3 movies that you're like, yeah, that changed how I looked at life, or how I experienced, or it was at a pivotal moment in your life.
Sure. Oh, golly. Well, Parting Glances would definitely be one of them. I think seeing Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown for the first time was my first Almodovar.
And you talk about that in the book too.
And I saw it in Madrid. I was visiting family, and
even saying that is insane.
I know. Like, my parents were the only people who, from their respective families, who emigrated. So all my cousins, all my aunts and uncles are all back there. So I've been a few times, and I happened to be there when it was still in theaters, and it had been running for months, but was still so popular that I literally bought like the last seat in the theater. And I speak pretty good Spanish, but like movies, everybody talks really fast. There's no subtitles. I was like, nah. But I got, apart from not knowing the word for eye drops, I understood the whole thing, and loved it. And that set off, like, he's probably one of my, if not my very favorite living filmmaker. And I've gotten to interview him a few times, which has been really cool. So that one definitely. And oh gosh, what else? Edward II, the Derek Jarman movie, because I had been out for a couple of years, but I was really getting into my angry period, my like activist, I have just came out, and all I'm hearing about is this disease that's killing everybody, and no one's doing anything about it. And, George Bush is still president, and and that was the first movie that I saw that made me realize that I wasn't the only person going, and like Greg Araki's The Living End was there for me for that, and several other films. But yeah, Edward II, I remember just being it was this bolt of lightning of like, yes, okay, yeah, I'm not crazy. Somebody else is seeing all this, I
just want to point out another beautiful part of Hollywood Pride and why it's so appropriate for Pride season and Pride Month. You show how resilient the queer filmmaking community has been, because you talk about, okay, we were told this, you have to censor all of this. We still figured out a way. Right. Then the ratings came out, and then AIDS came out, but we still found a way. And what you so beautifully do is show how present day we're still finding a way. Yeah. And we'll always find a way. Yeah. No matter what happens in the next
the word perseverance is in the title for a reason.
Yes. And you do that so beautifully. So it's a great gift too, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So go get Hollywood Pride, available everywhere. And I got my copy. Where can everybody find it? We have like pages more, but we got to go. We're gonna have to do a part 2. And we'll bring a vocal coach in for it.
Bring the apple cider vinegar next time for sure. I am Alonso.Duralde on Instagram, Duralde at Blue Sky. I'm on Facebook. I'm the easiest person on earth to Google because I'm
everywhere.
I'm the only Alonso Duralde. So it's if you
and you're everywhere.
I do my best. But yeah, you can read me at The Film Verdict. Listen to me on Linoleum Knife, Maximum Film, Breakfast All Day, Deck the Hallmark, and the the Film Library, a Canopy podcast. And yes, pick up Hollywood Pride. It's a book, it's an ebook, and it's an audio book. It's the first time I read one, which was very cool to do, and also very straining on my poor larynx. Yeah. Oh, and if you are in Nashville, I will be there on the Wednesday, the 24th, screening The Last of Sheila at the beautiful Belcourt Theater and signing books afterwards, thanks to Novelette Books. So I'm looking forward to that. I went to college there, so I'm psyched to go back.
Perfect. And the book is full of beautiful pictures, by the way, too.
Yes. If you get the audiobook, you should also get the one of the other versions because the pictures are, and I can say this because I had nothing to do with the layout of this. It is a beautiful piece. Done
yeah. And if you want to appear smart, put this on your coffee table. Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been such a joy to chat with you because I love film so much. So to be able to chat with somebody who has done the damn thing is very exciting.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. That's all, folks. It's always a grab bag of fun here every week on The Rocks. Big thank you to our engineer and station owner, Tony Sweet, our social media clip editor, Alexis Mendez. We have RuPaul's Drag Race's Pandora Box coming to talk about her new dance album. We have some of the members of the touring production of Clue coming in, and we have Glenn Rotman, the world's most recognized certified celebrity hypnotherapist. He's going to try to hypnotherapy me. That'll be interesting. Please like, share, subscribe so we can continue bringing this fabulous programming coming your way. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, stay sexy, and if you drink, stay tipsy. This has been another episode of On the Rocks. Tweet me, slide into my DMs on Twitter and Instagram at On the Rocks On Air. Find everything On the Rocks for free at OnTheRocksRadioShow.com. Subscribe, like, review, and share. Until next week, stay fabulous.